There's no going back.
Psychosis, a severe mental disorder in which thought and emotions are so impaired that contact is lost with external reality. This word is what the developers had in mind when creating Hellblade. A small indie team attempted to create an experience to mimic what it's like to have symptoms of psychosis. Hellblade successfully emulates what the experience is like, but the Switch port fails to capture it. Let me tell everyone watching what my priorities are when it comes to video games. I am always a gameplay first type of guy. If the overall gameplay is fun like Super Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, or Persona 5, then I will most likely have fun with the game. All the games I mentioned are not graphically intensive at all, but with Hellblade, the presentation affects the entire experience. Right when you boot up the game, one of the first messages tells you that the game is best experienced with headphones, and this is where the first problem starts. This game absolutely should be played with headphones since it's the ideal way to play. Throughout the game, you're going to hear voices and whispers coming out of each side of the headphone. It's an amazing effect. The voices are constantly shifting from one ear to the other, and sometimes the voices are only in one ear. You hear a combination of whispers and yelling, and it creates a sense of fear that most horror games fail to accomplish. But when it comes from the TV, the immersion's ruined. The whispers are hard to make out, and it loses the sense of uneasiness. Since this is the Switch, you can play it portably, but that adds a bunch of new problems which I'll get into later. The cutscenes, on the other hand, are stunning. I'm amazed that the Switch is able to show off the cutscenes at this quality. It's not just the visuals, it's the sound design and the cinematography as well. Some of the camera angles will have Senua looking right at you with a blue light while a narrator monologues, or when the camera spins around Senua, reinforcing the effect of not knowing where the voices are coming from. My favorite cutscene comes from when Senua is talking to herself about how she failed in a sinister man's voice, and then proceeds to burn part of her skin. The cutscenes make the stakes feel real, and that is exemplified through the top-notch voice acting. Melina Juergens plays the main role of Senua, and she is amazing. She does a phenomenal job of portraying the fear, sadness, anger, and doubt that Senua has.
Their gods can see into your mind. They will use this power to destroy you.
They won't stop me. I can still feel it.
Whatever's left of him, they will never let him go.
I'm not gonna let him rot here.
You're the one rotting here.
Leave me alone.
You will die here.
No.
And all your suffering will have been for nothing.
Shut up!
All of these elements equal an immersive experience for the player. But once again, that immersion is broken once you realize how underwhelming the graphics are. The textures are noticeably low res from the start, which wouldn't be an issue if the cutscenes matched the in-game graphics. The game loves to crossfade between in-game graphics and cutscenes, but this is when the immersion is broken. The wonderfully looking environments turns into textures that look like it could come from a Wii game. Since this game focuses on story, it uses the transition many times and it becomes distracting. Texture pop-in is also an issue when coming out of cutscenes and exploring areas. You can make the argument that it adds to the whole psychosis element, but in this case, it's the hardware's fault and not a choice by the developers. To make matters worse, Senua on the Switch uses adaptive resolution, meaning the quality varies depending on what's happening on screen. The maximum resolution is 720p, but it doesn't stay at that mark for too long. It constantly dips below that, especially when entering combat. And in portable mode, it doesn't look any better. The game runs at 720p in portable mode once every blue moon, but at least you get the audio effects. Even then, the watered down graphics still break the immersion. I know I keep bringing up that word, but it's an important aspect of this game. I'll give credit where it's due though, because there is a lot of attention to detail in Hellblade. Sometimes you'll see multiple versions of Senua, faded versions of objects, trees that have blinking eyes disappear when you get close to them, the various distorted lighting effects on the screen when solving puzzles, and the gorgeous lighting effects bouncing off the shores of the beaches. Some of the best looking areas are when there's not much going on. One area in particular is one of the trials Senua faces in the later half of the game. The environment is dark and intentionally blurry this time, and you have to navigate Senua through it without alerting the monsters that lurk in the shadows. The dark combined with the faded and blurry background made my childhood fear of the dark come back. But that's not technically right. It's more like the fear of the unknown. Okay, the presentation may have missed the mark, but the story is one of the best aspects of Hellblade. As mentioned earlier, Hellblade was developed with the idea of making the player experience what it's like to deal with psychosis. Meet Senua, a girl who is struggling with the darkness inside her, and apparently this darkness has caused many people to die. Senua struggles with the darkness while traveling to Helheim to find the soul of Dillion, which is her husband? Lover? It doesn't really say, but it's obvious that she loves him. She even learned how to become a warrior by watching him. It's interesting because now in order to save him, she has to use everything she has learned from him. But it's not that simple. Senua is going through psychosis herself. She hears voices entering her mind and is haunted by previous voices from her past, and they do not let up on her. One of the best scenes in the game is when Senua finally reaches the door to hell, fails, and then the voices want her to end her life. The story does a good job making you feel sorry for her because of how weak she is in the beginning. And yes, this is mainly due to her psychosis and what it does to her, but she eventually develops as a character and conquers her inner demons. Her driving force is to resurrect Dillion, and that gives her a reason to not give up, even when things are looking grim. By the end of the game, I started to question whether everything I saw was real because of the ending. Was it all real what she just went through? Or was her journey just an illusion created by psychosis? It really added to the immersion of the game along with the gameplay. The overall structure of the game is linear. There's not much to find aside from these slabs with symbols on them, which tells the tale of some Norse mythology. Hellblade is mostly made up of solving puzzles. A lot of the solutions are finding specific patterns that are hidden within an area, finding your way through a fiery maze, aligning patterns to match what's on a door, or traveling through a forest full of illusions. Some of these puzzles where you have to find hidden symbols can be rather challenging since anything can count as it, so don't be afraid to double check light sources in the room. Don't let this linearity fool you. The game does not hold your hand at all. There are no tutorials in this game, and you have to figure out everything yourself. If you want to consider the first combat encounter a tutorial, I guess it makes sense, although it doesn't really tell you about the various mechanics of the battle system, like various attacks you can use and how to block. I had to learn the mechanics throughout my playthrough, and discovered something new every encounter. It's a simplistic battle system. You have both light and heavy attacks you can use. Light attacks will deliver quick strikes with low damage. Heavy attacks can break an enemy's block and stagger them, and kicks can lower an opponent's shield, allowing you to deal damage. Don't think you can rapidly spam any of these attack buttons. Strategy is key when entering a battle because the game does not hold back when adding more enemies to overwhelm you. Enemies can block and even knock you down. You can avoid this by blocking, dodging, or parrying. By hitting the block button at the right time, you can perform a parry and damage the enemy. One of the unique mechanics of this combat system is the focus. You can see the focus meter building up by looking at the mirror on Senua's waist. The focus can be built up by dealing damage to enemies, parrying, or dodging enemy attacks at the last possible second. By activating the focus, all the enemies will slow down, allowing you to strike without fear until the meter runs out. Maintaining the focus meter is key to winning some of the toughest battles in the game, including the bosses. One of the beginning bosses can only be damaged when in focus, but can still move at regular speed. A later boss makes it required to have the focus ready, or else you will die from a psychotic breakdown. One thing I forgot to mention is the gimmick with this game. You may have noticed that Senua's arm is black. That is the darkness that resides within her. Every time she falls in combat, the darkness will get closer to her head. If it reaches her head, it's game over for your save file. Yes, you will lose all of your progress if it reaches her head, and you will have to start all over. And I like it. It adds to the fear of death and overall immersion. I keep bringing up the word immersion for a reason. It's an important aspect to this game, and it's very clear sacrifices had to be made to get this game running on the Switch. There is a good game here without a doubt, but it's just not on the Switch. The presentation is a big part of this game, and when the Switch version fails to bring that immersion, then it's not worth it. But what do I know? I'm just some random guy on the internet who decided to review Hellblade on the Nintendo Switch. So what do you guys think? Am I being too harsh on the presentation of this game, or do you think the game is worth it on the Nintendo Switch? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to like this video and subscribe for more video game reviews. Up next, we'll be taking a look at Cuphead and the US version of Super Mario Bros. 2.